right, let's talk about minor triads and their enclosures. So it's difficult to use just like the whole half when you're talking about the major scale, let alone that's going to get much worse when you go to talk about the minor scale. So let's talk about the distances between the notes of the minor scale, how they relate to our triad, and where the half steps occur. Let's take a D minor triad right here in root position. So that's root, flat third, and fifth. So when I think about the minor scale, I focus on the fact that the flat third has a half step beneath it to the 2 or to the second. The fifth, so root, flat third, fifth, has a half step up to the flat 6. That gives us the minor scale because everything else is going to be a whole step, right? So if I'm on the root, then I know that I can go up a whole step to the 2 or a whole step behind it, in this case, which would be the flatted 7th, right? But just focusing on the root's always going to have a whole step either way. The flat third, once again, has a half step beneath, but that means whole step above. The fifth, once again, has a half step above, but that means a whole step beneath to the 4. So altogether, we have root, second, flat third, fourth, fifth, flat 6, flat 7 of the minor scale. It's already a handful to say there. So if you focus on the flat 3 gets a half step down to the 2, and the 5 gets a half step up to the flat 6. Now we've got our minor triad and our enclosure notes from the minor scale to be able to be creative, whether it be melodically or with chords, or just to identify where certain intervals are, or even if we want to change them later. So if we take each D minor triad inversion, we could start with root position, root, flat third, fifth, right? And then we've got first inversion. That puts the root up top. So if the root is up top, I count backwards to the fifth, backwards to the flat third. So root, fifth, flat third. So if I try my enclosures there, I have the root. Here's the second. Whole step down to the flat 7, back to the root. If I go down a note, now I'm on the fifth. Remember, the fifth has a half step up to the flat 6th. Whole step back to the 4th, back to the 5th. If I'm on the flat third, that's got to be a whole step up or a half step beneath it to the 2nd, back to the flat 3rd. Mainly just focusing on the flat 3rd gets a half step below it, the 5 gets a half step above it. Now with a word from today's sponsor, my course, Triads 0 to Hero. If you like this lesson, please click the link below to save $20 on that course and learn more about major triads, their enclosures, and how to use triads freely throughout progressions in music. Now back to the lesson. And finally, that brings me to D minor in second inversion. Second inversion means that the root is going to be in the middle or in the center, second string there. So I have the flat third above that and the fifth below it. Both of those notes are where my half steps occur, right? So flat third could have a half step down to the 2 or a whole step above to the 4, back to the flat third. Here's my root. That's a whole step either way. And then here's my fifth. Half step up to flat 6, whole step down to 4, back to 5, right? So that might sound something like this if I just play the triads and focus on making some melodies around using the enclosures, but not really having to focus on an entire scale shape or box or a bunch of dead dots, focusing on my triad and how these notes relate. Check it out. Go up to first inversion. Second inversion. So at all times, I'm aware of what my triad looks like, what the intervals are, and how far the distances are between them. This could be incredibly helpful for me in the future when I start to dive into other sounds too, other modes, other textures, other melodies, things like that. As long as I know my triad and I know the distance between the notes, specifically where the half steps occur, I'm in good shape and I should start to have a lot of freedom on my fretboard. Now that you've watched this lesson on minor triads and their enclosures, click this video here to watch more about major triads and their enclosures.